You ask, how can one in healthy ways deal with strong empathic connections with others and their suffering, even experiencing and feeling that as one's own, which can lead to dissociation and lack of energy, motivation, lifelessness, and lack of joy. Down through the centuries, there have been many sensitive people, many of them saints, who have had this experience, this intense empathy, this absorption of the pain of others in their physical being, in their emotional being. One of them recently is Simone Weil, who wrote the masterful Waiting for God. These people found ways to not be consumed by this, which certainly can happen, this tidal wave of human suffering and tragedy being sensed as deep as ourselves. My suggestion to you is that this paradox of being so sensitive towards others also requires an inner strength that is not overwhelmed. Otherwise, it is impossible to make use of that empathy, to care for others. If one is hurt oneself, if one is in pain oneself, one cannot take the pain away in some form or another. For instance, those who will turn that sensitivity into prayer, into healing prayer, actually putting out energy that is restorative to others, not just asking a higher power, but participating in the process of soothing, easing, changing the lives of others. In order to do this, while feeling intensely, one has to find a place beyond those feelings so that out of that more objective strength, one is able to take some kind of psychic action. I think of the story of Mr. Gurdjieff himself, who was at a table with friends, with students, with the Bennetts in particular, J.G. Bennett and his wife, and she had cancer from which she eventually passed on, and she was in terrible pain. And it was mentioned that she was in pain, and after a few moments, Mr. Gurdjieff turns to her and says, "Where is your pain now?" And she responds, "You have it." So that empathy of sensation can also be turned into an empathy of healing, a capacity to absorb and give back, to take away, without being drowned in it oneself. So if you can understand, intellectually at least, that it is possible to use this gift in a way that is positive and not just be victimized by your own sensitivity, then you can start the journey of inwardly understanding how to master this condition. In other words, what you have is actually a gift, and you want to know how to use that gift in order to best help those whose suffering you sense so deeply. There is another step to take in discovering the fullness of this gift. Knowing that you are so empathetic is step one. Step two is to turn that into a power that can be helpful not only to others but to yourself. For instance, people who have a healing gift with their hands put their hands on someone's migraine, for instance, and literally absorb that pain into their body. The heat leaves the person's head, enters into their hands to the point where the hands turn red or swell up. But those who have mastered the gift of healing know how to then release, let go, put out that energy, control it, so that the process of removing the pain doesn't become a pain for them and thereby cripples them from doing that healing. So approach it from a new perspective, from realizing that there is something else there to be found besides the sensitivity to suffering. That ability, that gift can be transformed into healing for others. Just having that thought in your mind, that realization intellectually, can point you towards ways in which you can better channel those feelings. For instance, becoming aware of such distress from others and moving that, transforming that into prayer, not only becomes a helpful way in which to reach out to them, but changes that energy, releases it from you as a suffering and a depressive thing, in a destruction of energy, but rather becomes food, fuel for a different kind of energy. This is similar to taking our negativity and rerouting it so that it becomes consciousness, presence, rather than hemorrhaging and waste of our life force. So the shortcut to dealing with such abilities, such strain on your own being, is to begin the process of, shall we say, alchemically focusing it and rerouting it and channeling it so that it turns into something else. Your knowledge of a person's struggle can become the source of your assisting them rather than just simply flattening you. In terms of keeping one's peace and joy in the midst of this awareness, this is where it is essential to have a connection to the holy, so that in the midst of the human condition of such suffering and tragedy, there is this centeredness in the divine in such a way that from that plane of consciousness you can reach out to them, knowing that there is something more, that this is not the end of the story, just as our mortality need not be the end of the story with the right understanding. This is a paradigm of the awakening process, and you can use this gift as an opportunity to give you greater third force, greater energy, greater motivation to rise up in consciousness, to come into yourself in a deeper way that is beyond the flood of empathetic feelings, so that that part of you that is above it and serene can know how to use it. This is not impossible by any means. This is what is meant to be. So instead of seeing it as, shall we say, a curse, see it as a blessing. Because now you have the potential of not only having this mysterious knowledge of others' suffering, but ways in which you can creatively respond to it without it pulling you down. And this is not a selfish thing by any means. You cannot help others if you are pulled into the whirlpool of suffering and tragedy. What is needed in those conditions of pain is someone who has rooted themselves in a peace that is healing to others, in a creative openness to a higher dimension that inspires them to respond in some way or another and to channel something higher into the situation. So try for a time to separate yourself out for the purpose not of not feeling it, but for the intent of managing it in a way that is creative and healing to both you and the sufferer. And then you may find all kinds of new event horizons in this ability that you have, in this sensitivity. You may find a psychic healing, prayer, closeness to God, all of these extraordinary gifts and powers that can turn all of this distress into real, tangible blessing. Take the risk of seeing the positive side of this. And as for joy, it is the maintaining or renewing of your joy that becomes part of the healing for those who have no joy.